My pleasure to have you here, Mohamed Amjahid. Brief introduction. So you're a German journalist. You're a writer, as far as I know. You've written at least a couple of books. First one was published in 2017, Among Whites, What It Means to Be Privileged. In book published in 2021, The White Spot, A Guide to Anti-Racist Thinking. So we started today's discussions talking about morality, hypocrisy, power. So I'm sure we're gonna proceed with on the same subject. And your presentation is called Good Refugees, Bad Refugees, Migration Between Europe's Self-Image and Universal Human Rights. So, thanks for joining us, and screen is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very happy to join you. And I'm very happy that Zoom is actually working and you can see me apparently and hear me. I'm right now in Turkey, also doing research about the refugee topic, but I would like to discuss with you today the handling of the refugee topic in the European Union in general, and especially since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, of the Russian attack on Ukraine. And from now I can say that I would like to keep my presentation as short as possible so we have the opportunity to have a discussion. I would love to hear your questions and your remarks, actually, also your perspective from a part of Europe that is not so familiar for me. I'm very keen and interested in hearing about your perspectives, actually. And if you have any question in between, if something is not clear, please just chip in and hopefully I can make it clear what I wanted to point out. So, at the very beginning, I would like to clarify one thing before I start my argumentation and my observations as a reporter. What I will say today is not an advocacy to take something from Ukrainian refugees. It's the opposite, actually. I think it's not really the best practice how the European Union was dealing with Ukrainian refugees, because we always can do better, but it's the best practice that we have. And this is, in my point of view, how Europe and the European Union should treat all other people who are seeking shelter and who are seeking asylum in the European Union. So, for me, it's important to really emphasize it's not about taking something from a group, but it's about equality and less hypocrisy. It was said at the beginning, and as a journalist, it's my job actually to point fingers and to discuss inequalities in this case. So in early 2021, Putin attacked Ukraine, and for a lot of people in Europe, especially in European capitals, it was a very shocking fact. Actually, when you look now at the history, it was maybe shocking, but not surprising, because a lot of societies and countries and people, they were warning about exactly this war, not only in Ukraine, but also in the Baltics, in Central and Eastern Europe. But a lot of Western European governments are very, thinking about themselves, and they didn't listen to what other people with other expertise were warning about. But then it happened in early 2021, and for me as a journalist, it was the question what I can do with this situation. It's clear for me that I am not an expert on Ukrainian or Russian affairs, so I just continued what I was doing since a lot of years. I was looking at the situation of refugees at the borders of the European Union. Early in March 2021, I had a look actually at different media discourses about handling the rise of the war in Ukraine, and a lot of people actually fleeing from the violence. that was caused by the attack. And I was observing, let's put it in very simple words, observing very weird arguments why we as Europe, which means often Western Europe actually, why we as Europe have to have the Ukrainian people and refugees. And one of my most beloved quotes come from a French TV commentator. He actually said, quote, they, and he means the Ukrainians, quote, they drive the same cars as we do, quote, end of quote, which for me is very hilarious actually to take this as an argument to hurt someone. There was another commentator on German television that I would like to quote, just to give you an idea why I'm talking about this topic in the first place. Quote, Ukraine is a country that is impressing us. They are hardworking and they share our values. This is why they are welcome in Germany, Poland, or even Hungary, unlike other people. End of quote. Unlike other people. This is actually my topic. This is actually the question that is with me all the time when I'm doing the research, like now, for example, here in Turkey. I could speak later if you would like a little bit more about the situation here. Our last quote I would like to introduce from the NZZ, that's a Swiss right-wing newspaper. Quote, this time, these are real refugees, end of quote. This time, these are real refugees. Since a long time now, I'm not the youngest anymore, since a long time I'm reporting about the situation of people who are seeking asylum, of refugees in the European Union, especially in Germany, but also in other countries. And I am observing certain framing, especially since the war broke out in Ukraine, and the construction of two groups. Refugees, which is for a lot of people in Europe, Ukrainians, and so-called migrants, which is actually a framing that I observed not only in Germany, but also in other countries. I had the opportunity to work for years now, for example, in Hungary, and translate a lot of discourses and comments and media coverage from, for example, Hungarian state TV, which has a big power in Hungary, and they, since 2015, frame any person which is not white and trying to seek asylum in the European Union as migrants. Therefore, I would love to actually point out that it's very important to read critically any text or any coverage about, especially refugees, because they like to refer to them as migrants, to demonize them, and to say that they choose to leave their countries, actually. So this is one big point for me, the framing as migrants, in contrast to telling the truth about Ukrainians who seek refuge, who are refugees in the European Union. A second important point, and again, if you have any questions, please interrupt me and I can answer your question, or if you have any remarks. The second big point I would like to introduce, or argument I would like to introduce, in especially German discourses, is that a lot of people, also politicians, started after March 2021 to point out that most people from Ukraine that are coming to the European Union are women and children. This is actually just an observation, which is also true. Part of my work is look at the statistics. It's true that most of people who fled Ukraine are actually women and children. This has a very easy explanation because, as you may all know, men are not allowed to leave Ukraine, even though there were cases where men tried to leave Ukraine because they didn't want to be in the war, or they couldn't be in the war. But the numbers say that most people who left the country are women and children. But when you read actually the text, the comments, when you listen to politicians talk about helping women and children, often what they want to say is, we do not want any other people, men fleeing from war, being in the European Union. And what they mean is people, in this case, men, fleeing from war in Afghanistan or Syria, should stay there and die. I'm like over-exaggerating a little bit to make a point. And I think from a human rights perspective, it's not only sad, but it makes me actually mad to make the argument that people should die because of their gender. Of course, it's clear that everybody should be welcome, all refugees should be welcome, but even in helping one group, some people have enough time and enough energy and resources to order another group and to say, oh, in 2015, they fled actually from war instead of staying in Syria and defending their own country, which is interesting because now I can say, I think at this moment, most people or a lot of people who fled or are fleeing from Syria are fleeing also from Putin's bombs. That's actually a very big point. And making the argument that we should help Ukrainians because these are mostly women and children makes it very hard to believe that European values, I'm sure you spoke about this concept of European values that we need to reflect and deconstruct. We say in this case that men, but in this case also women and children from other countries can die in other wars. So this is another big point I observed in the discourse actually. These are two important discourses, arguments to framing as migrants and alleged helping of women and children from Ukraine. Then I'm not only looking at discourses but also at policy. And maybe you remember early after the attack, after Putin's attack on Ukraine, there was a meeting of the heads of government in Brussels discussing the situation in Ukraine and how to deal with it. And in March 2021, very early, the European Union and the whole, the Commission and the governments decided to activate a guideline with the number 2001-55 EG, 2001-55 EG, which was, as the name says, built or designed in the year 2001 after the wars on the Balkans. This guideline was entirely unknown by all the observers in Brussels and in Europe. Also, I didn't know about this, and I'm working since a long time about the refugee situation in Europe. And this guideline actually helped by activating it with safe passage for refugees from Ukraine, free mobility in the European Union, and access to social services for all Ukrainian citizens, which actually was a good solution in 2021. Because a lot of people came from Ukraine and crossed the border, for example, to Poland, and they had the freedom to choose where to go in the European Union, which took pressure from certain countries. Yes, it's true that, for example, Poland still hosts most of Ukrainians, which is very easy to explain because a lot of Ukrainians had family and friends in Poland, actually. But this guideline, this EU guideline, made it easier for a lot of Ukrainians to say, I do have a brother or a sister or an aunt or a friend in Hamburg or in Paris or in Madrid, and I can go and it's easier for me to stay there. And it took actually pressure also from the different social systems in the European Union. It's true that not all countries share the same burden. Hosting, it's not a burden actually, it's something that countries need to do, but it's true that it's not the same amount of resources and work going into hosting Ukrainian refugees, but actually this was a good idea to activate this guideline that gives Ukrainian refugees big freedom of especially mobility. But at the same time, I was wondering, and then I did the research, why didn't they activate exactly this guideline in 2015 when I was actually as a reporter on the Balkan route and in especially Budapest? Some of you may remember the pictures from Budapest where thousands and thousands of refugees, especially from Syria and Afghanistan, were waiting for safe passage to other European countries. My question was, why did not the European Union activate this guideline, which was ready in Brussels, just waiting for the right situation? Why didn't they activate it? And the answer was actually in Brussels very interesting. The answer was it was impossible to activate it because unanimously the different countries were against activation, especially Central and Eastern European countries from the Baltic, Poland, Hungary, but also the Germans actually, if I may say it now very clearly, they love to play the good guy and say, oh, the Hungarians, they are the ones who are against the refugees. But actually the Hungarians are doing what different German governments want the Hungarians to do, to close the border, actually. It's easier for them than to argue, oh, these are the people who are bad and we are the good ones. But it happens that Germany is in the center of Europe and the dirty work actually can be made by Poland, for example, in this case, by Italy or by Hungary. So the only explanation I have why this guideline was not activated in 2015 is actually racism. That's the only explanation I found out when talking to a lot of people in Brussels and in Berlin, especially, knowing that this guideline would have brought a lot of solutions in 2015 and made a lot of things easier for a lot of people seeking asylum in the European Union. I have a couple of more points. Again, if you have any questions or any clarification, please just chip in. Another important point for me, from my perspective, which is a German perspective actually, is that a lot of people, also when I talk about this topic in Germany, a lot of people give me feedback and say, Ukraine is just closer to us. And people mean it geographically. And when I say this in Germany, I ask most people to get their phones and look at the distance, actually, from Berlin or Hamburg to Luhansk, and from Berlin or Hamburg or Frankfurt to Melilla or to the Mediterranean in Italy. And the result is that Melilla, which is a Spanish enclave, for those who don't know, a Spanish enclave in northern Morocco, where a lot of refugees try to cross into the European Union, Melilla is closer to Berlin than Luhansk in Ukraine. And a lot of Germans are shocked about this. Maybe they didn't pay attention in school, in geography class, but it's also a sign how proximity is constructed in discourses. People fear that Luhansk and Ukraine is closer, and actually it's not closer. Even though I would never argue with kilometers when it comes to human rights, it's not an argument to say this country is closer, this is why we need to take more care about this situation. But still, it's interesting for me that people feel that one country is closer and the other situation is very, very far. But this construction, actually, of proximity has something to do with the construction of us. Who are we, actually? And as I said, I'm not an expert in Ukraine, nor Russia, nor Eastern European countries, but I read a lot of newspapers. And I have the feeling that from a Baltic point of view, for example, there's a lot to learn as a German about your perspective and your history. And the construction of who we are is a very artificial one. The European Union that often tries to argue with values and with in German we say Gemeinschaft, with actually an in-group is a very artificial construction that we need actually to reflect. And we didn't, from a German perspective, listen to you guys for years and years. That's one main problem that we see what's happening now in Ukraine. It's a main problem actually that German politicians, they didn't listen to you and they actually enjoyed cheap oil and gas and friendship with Putin in this case. So even this we has to be reflected in this case also a very wide, like the color white in because what happened when Putin attacked Ukraine is that a lot of commentators and a lot of politicians argued that Ukrainians look like us. It's actually, I think it's very, very problematic and racist, but a lot of commentators actually, they mention blonde hair and blue eyes. Not only they drive the same cars, but they have blonde hair and blue eyes, which led to the very difficult situation at, for example, the Ukrainian-Polish border, where a lot of Ukrainian citizens were stopped because they didn't have blue eyes and blonde hair. For example, Sinti and Roma from Ukraine. They are Ukrainian citizens, but they were stopped actually, not only by the Polish government or by the Polish border control, but also later when they came to Germany, they were stopped also by German police. Because people believe that Ukrainians have to look a certain way. Plus, while the bombs were actually killing people in Ukraine, a lot of third country citizens who were working or studying or just being tourists in Ukraine also tried to leave and flee, because they were in danger. A lot of people from Nigeria, from Tunisia, from Morocco, from India, and these people were stopped at the border for a couple of days actually, which is for me a big scandal because how can you see that people are fleeing towards your direction from bombs and you let blonde and blue-eyed people through and you stop black people and brown people? It's because they don't look like you expect people coming from Ukraine have to look like. So this also gives us this possibility to deconstruct who we are, who we imagine we are in a European framework. And I have two more points and then we can go into the discussion if you want. This critique that I have and that I can elaborate later in the discussion if you want, is also something that is warning especially Ukrainian refugees in European countries. Because the solidarity today can go tomorrow away. If it's constructed, it's very, very easy to just do like this and then stop the solidarity, which actually happens and happened in the last couple of months. Again, I'm not an expert in Eastern European countries, but I read a lot of reports that people in Poland or the government in Poland is tired of having so many Ukrainian refugees, for example. But I'm more expert in German affairs. So a couple of weeks and months ago, I think around the first anniversary of Putin's attack, Friedrich Merz, who is the leader of the opposition party CDU in Germany, the biggest opposition party CDU, he was referring to Ukrainian refugees as asylum tourists, saying that they would come to Germany, take the social aid money from the German government and go back to Ukraine and then come to collect the money again. And this is how fast solidarity is gone. Actually, if you construct something, it's really easy to just dissolve it again. And this not only 1 year after the attack. So being critical and staying critical is also very important for all kinds of refugees, also for Ukrainian refugees, to understand that solidarity might be also just performative. The solidarity might have an end, actually. We can see I'm not a military expert and I'm very critical about how it's handled actually, but you can see that the Ukrainian government is actually trying hard to argue to have any kind of military aid. It's not something that just comes like this. They have actually to advocate for it. From a refugee and human rights perspective, it's nothing natural that comes. That, for example, Germans show their solidarity with Ukrainian refugees is something that we always have to reflect and talk about and actually demand. Not only in this case for Ukrainian refugees, but also for other refugees. So the question is, why are there first and second class, if I might say it like this, of refugees in Europe? And I think in the Ukrainian case, it just fits European political discourses so well, which changed actually in February and March 2021, so dramatically from a German perspective. Because what the German government and big parts of the society were saying, they were saying Russian government is super cute. This is what the Germans were saying till 2021. From the Baltics, the Ukrainians, Polish people, all warned us that we should be more aware of an aggression, but we just lost the very cheap gas. And Gerhard Schröder is just very, very good friends with Putin at the end. So if you observe how easily and fast the discourse changed in Germany, you could also argue that the solidarity with the Ukrainians can easily change very, very fast. And that's why we need to talk about this, and we need to talk about the fact that a person that is fleeing from Putin's bombs in Aleppo or Idlib in Syria is not welcome right now in the European Union, unlike someone who's fleeing from Putin's bombs in Ukraine. And this is a big, big problem. This is a moral big problem, a political big problem, from a human rights perspective, a big problem. It's not only that the people coming from the Middle East, North Africa, or for example Afghanistan are not welcome, they're actually killed in the Mediterranean or at the border to Poland, for example, with Belarus. They're killed by Frontex with our own tax money, with your tax money actually. So there's actually a big hypocrisy and a big shift in so-called European values, and it depends about which group we are talking. If we're talking about blonde and blue-eyed refugees, then they are right now still welcome. If we are talking about other people, the so-called other groups, then this European Union is doing its best to not let these people have at least a chance to have a decent and safe life. And I think this we have to talk about, not only in Germany, not only in France, not only in Poland, but in the European Union as a whole, and especially in Eastern European countries, because from my Hungarian perspective or experience, I know that it's easy to talk to some societies and say the one group is good because they look at us, and the other group is actually a danger for us. And this is why I would love to see this kind of political discourses also in Central and Eastern European countries. So I promise that I will not talk forever. I think I spoke now for half an hour. So this is good for now, I think, and if you have any questions or remarks, I would be very happy to take them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think I will be sitting here so you can also see me. And
yeah, I see you. Hi, nice to meet you.
So as a moderator, I really want to ask the first questions. I do agree with a lot of what you're saying, and at the same time I have a couple of discussion points or contra-arguments, thinking about how hypocrisy, solidarity and morality probably always intertwine, in a sense that I think that discourse about refugees from Ukraine in Lithuania and I guess in Poland are a bit different in a sense that we have a feeling that we owe them. So it's not about proximity, it's not about closeness, but that there's a feeling that they defend our borders. So it's really pragmatic, and it's really, in a sense, selfish that, we want to keep war outside our countries. So that's the argument that I've heard lots of times. We want to accept those refugees because, we sort of feel guilty that they are fighting our war. So, I think that brings more colors into what you're saying. I was also thinking about the other perspective of closeness with Ukraine, and I don't want to sound that I'm saying that, Ukrainian refugees are the best, and, there are no problems with that, but European Union had much closer cooperation with Ukraine before in framework of Eastern Partnership agreements and discussion about perspective of joining European Union just years before the war broke out. So I'm just thinking about different ways how to think about closeness besides distances between different parts of the countries. So how would you react to that?
Okay, thank you so much to this point. Actually, I'm very, very interested to have your thoughts and perspectives. As I said, I don't know a lot about Baltic discourses, for example, so for me it's very valuable to have your thoughts about this. I would argue that selfishness is a very European value, actually. It's something very, very European Union. If you go to Brussels and you talk to politicians, it's always about selfishness. They make it sometimes about, we are helping our neighbors, but it's actually about their own perspective at the end, which is kind of understandable from a political point of view. And I do understand actually that you do have an intertwined history in the Baltics, in Poland, in Ukraine, Russia, with the Soviet history actually. So there is a valuable and valid argument actually to say that there is a proximity when you look at it from a historical point of view. Also from a German point of view, I mean, Eastern Germany was very, very close to, for example, the Soviet Union, which is very interesting because in Eastern Germany you have a lot of people who love Putin and who are very critical towards Ukraine. And for me, as an outsider, if you want, I was always asking, but Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union. Why? I don't understand. Well, maybe they just remember how they went to Moscow when they were very young. I don't know. But I would argue that selfishness in European politics is a stable point that is always there, which is a problem from a human rights perspective, because you can be selfish and have this Eurocentric point of view, but at the end, in the forest between Belarus and Poland, you have people standing and dying from hunger and cold and trying to get refuge in the European Union, and you have the Polish government that actually closes the border. Meanwhile, they are opening the border to Ukraine. So you can be selfish, but you can also argue that it doesn't make sense to talk in this case about human rights. If you let some people in and you make it so hard, or you fight actually other refugees, or you frame them as it happens, actually weapons from the Belarus government, in this case, or regime. The Eastern Partnership Agreement, I also would agree with you about the relationship between Ukraine and different European countries and the European Union. But I would like to point out that the first country that had a privileged partnership with the European Union in the context of its neighborhood policy was Morocco. And from a German perspective, politicians are very, very keen to have more close ties and relationships to northern African countries because they want the solar power, they want the sun, they want these countries to do the dirty work, actually by not letting refugees go further north. They want the good olive oil at the end and the good vegetables. But again, this is, I think, from a Baltic perspective, a Polish perspective, of course, closer to saying we had more. From a Polish perspective, especially when I was each time in Poland, and I learned that you have millions of Ukrainians working in Poland, doing work that Polish people don't want to do anymore, you understand that there is a certain proximity. But when you are in Spain, actually, or in Italy, of course, the Northern African region is closer to this, to these countries. So you could argue that the partnership agreements are as strong in other regions as it was in Ukraine in 2021. Plus, the European Union and different governments, also the German government, they were always arguing that Ukraine is actually not that very welcome in the European Union. And with the Maidan protest, for example, we had this big discussion. Where is Ukraine actually on the map? Is it more on the Russian side or is it more on the European side? And we would have a lot of politicians in Berlin, for example, arguing that they are more, let them go to Russia, because, which is also part of the truth. There's a lot of corruption, for example, till today in Ukraine and in Berlin and in all the other countries. That this is like the acquis communautaire of the European Union, the shared guidelines and values are not fulfilled from a Ukrainian perspective. This is why a lot of countries in the Balkans are actually very mad that it seems that Ukraine gets like a special treatment right now joining the European Union or other organizations. And I would argue that relationship between Europe and Ukraine, and I would argue that Ukraine is part of Europe, but just from a geographical point of view, but that the relationships between Ukraine and Europe are as strong as the relationships, for example, between different North African countries and the European Union. But I understand this argumentation actually.
Thank you. I'm passing the microphone to other questions.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Irina Vishvilaite. As you see, also different generation. You know, had a large part of participants here. And also because of my longer work with politics and everything, I would like to look in perspective. Closer perspective is wave of migration of 2015. And how many refugees Germany took in, and other countries, just to remember that. At the same time, looking more back and back, talking about European Union and European countries' immigration policies. Many countries, for example, we have to talk about Scandinavia and Sweden, of course. So asylum, helping people who really fleeing from the wars. First war really in Europe after Second World War was Balkan War. And we have to be aware how many refugees of that war ended up, including Roma, also of Balkans Roma, in different European countries, beginning from Italy, ending up in Scandinavia. So there's one, you know, argument that Europe definitely was giving entry and all rights and help and family reunion for those people who definitely were fleeing extreme situation, political persecution, war, other disasters. From the very beginning, before actually it was not even European Union, before Maastricht Agreement. Second thing, we have to think about immigration from countries that were about to join after the communism system collapsed. So immigration from countries of ex-Soviet Union, including, for example, Lithuania, was very strong in Spain. And Spanish, I don't think they have special affinity to the blonde hair and blue eyes, considering the coloring of Spanish themselves. But they took very large numbers in, and mostly for doing very manual and low-paid jobs from Poles, Lithuanians, Latvians, and so on, from East Europe. So East European immigration was not greeted in European Union countries with applause. Very famous is campaign of Polish plumber in France. French didn't want Polish plumber. And many countries introduced a long embargo on immigrants, not refugees, but immigrants from countries, mostly because they didn't want it, even if some countries were much open, they didn't want economical immigration regarding their own issues. Here I also would say, that selfishness is not European value. It's value for politicians in all the world. Northern Africa, Central Africa, Asia, wherever, politicians and politics are selfish. That's one of the base of, we're talking about politics, especially in international relationships. Of course, my country comes first, how I understand it. So here, when we talk about morals, we have to talk about morals of individuals, because regarding solidarity with refugees and immigrants, usually individuals do a lot. Individuals, communities, that mean the groups of individuals who open their doors, open their churches. For example, if talk about Italy, largest immigrant group in Italy are Romanians, who do mostly of those, jobs that Italians don't want to do. Other immigrants are much less proportionally, especially if to talk about nationals. So again, I'm going into that because there's so lots of questions. I will come to blue eyes and blonde hair because we hear that a lot from World South in international relationships. It's an ideological accusation, saying, you prefer Ukrainians because they are blonde and blue eyes. What's not true. Most of Ukrainians are darker than Nordics. That's true. It's not about eyes and ears. But going back again to the same thing, first push, very serious, for immigration and actually neighborhood relationships in the European Union was coming from southern countries. Eastern neighborhood was copy created by some Eastern European countries of European Union, copy of southern neighborhood that was created on the push of Spain, Italy, Greece partially. And here we have to talk about immigration being weaponized. Inventors of that was Turkey, who really weaponized refugees from Syrian war, terrorizing the European Union for financial gain, saying we keep refugees from you, but you probably know from Germany actually how many billions European Union dispensed to Turkey, but also that huge wave of 2015 was created by Turkey itself. Because Turkey diminished by 50% financial help for immigrants that were stationed in Turkey. I'm not talking about, again, northern African countries that are not accepting refugees, just shifting their mode. So that's also about selfishness, yes, and value, also religious and partially ethnic. So all that story, we have to look into that without being very categorical, but really trying to look in it in complex. And here's also the same Poland after, from our point of view, but it's true, war in Ukraine started in 2013. Yes. Mm-hmm. And for European Union, refugees were only from South. European Union did not count refugees. Poland then took about 1 million of Polish refugees, of Ukrainian refugees from Eastern Ukraine, occupied by Russians. There was movement of people. Mostly nobody heard it, and lots didn't want to hear it. So Poles mostly were really upset with European Union, being themselves members of European Union, that they taken in refugees. But other countries want to also, to have quotas taken from South refugees. And that million of refugees from Ukraine was not on the balance sheets, but they were taken. They were given jobs, they were given, subsidies, and so on. So we have to be, seeing all sides and actually to look into it, because what you're saying, I understand, it's like how people talk on the street, how people talk in the beer bars, in the pubs, and the issues, that we have. But first of all, maybe we have to forget color of our skin and color of our eyes, and they're just to look, exactly in state politics, into how people participate in it and what to do. Because Polish border, when the war started, it's true, there are bombs. But Poles, Lithuanians, and Latvians, for about, I have to count for how many months, were attacked from Belarus when Belarusian state structures were attacking border of European Union using refugees. Inviting refugees in Belarus, promising them illegal entry into European Union and all the benefits of it, organizing flights, and then pushing the Belarusian border and even repressive structures towards borders that were mostly not defended and not first who did it were Russians in Norway in 2013. Because they used northern route, also pushing refugees into Norway, helping them to enter. So that consciousness is very little known, but on our part we are aware that you cannot turn refugees into weapon. Of course, and that's here we're not talking about solidarity, it's absolutely cynical use of people who would like to move, and many people who were coming were Kurds, quite often well-off Kurds, because in Lithuania we know a bit of social strata, of people that were crossing in, and those of people who were able to pay for legal services. They are in Lithuania, and they already moved into Germany or Sweden. They were looking into Lithuania as a transit country. But here we have, other refugees or other migrants or immigrants looking for better social strata and so on. So migration is huge global issue. It's issue in Asia, it's issue in Europe, it's issue in Africa, it's issue in many. So let's not turn it into racist discourse from all sides. I was diplomat, and I know that countries from world South uses it. There's in South world there's sometimes very strong anti-European feeling, and they say, well, you prefer just white, the white people, blue, blonde hair and blue eyes. It's racist discourse. It's reverse racism, and that also hurts us because it's not true. It's not true. It's also weaponized. I was listening to you, but please listen also to this side. You were saying that it's very serious and it's very easy to go on racist, moralizing lines. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Is there another question, or can I react to this?
I don't know about my introduction.
I don't see you very well, so you have to talk.
Yeah, just react.
Please react.
Okay, thank you so much. As I said, it's very, very interesting for me to have your perspective and your reaction to my thoughts. I would argue that there is nothing like reverse racism, because when we talk about political selfishness, we have to talk about power. And it makes a difference, actually, about which region or country or society we talk about. From a German perspective, of course, for example, we can do way more about the Ukrainian situation than in Lithuania, for example, because we just have more money and more resources in the frame of the European Union. Then we talk about another solution. But reverse racism is something that, from my analytical point of view, can only exist if we go back into history, and then there will be a colonization of Europe by some so-called global South. But as we all know, it happened the other way around. So it's actually not something that is constructed from my perspective at least, when I talk about inherent racism, when we talk about migration or refugee, is something which is actually happening to a lot of people. And I see it a bit here in Turkey, how with my tax money and your tax money, people are actually prevented to ask for asylum in the first place. And this is why also everyone didn't just weaponize the migration issue or the refugee issue, but also just cooperated very well with the back then German government under Angela Merkel. she was very happy to give Erdogan money so he can handle the problem for her. It's also like easy to say Tunisians and Turkey. Of course, these are not democratic, fully democratic regimes, but it's easy to say, they're doing, as I said before, the dirty work. But it's actually what the German government in this case wants them to do. So for me, it's very important always to talk about power when talking about politics. And I think that there is a historical point of view that makes it, that pushes people to receive refuge in Europe and go from other countries, exactly in this case, mostly towards the north. And you're right that most people, at least also in the European Union, most individuals are the ones who are doing a lot when it comes to supporting not only Ukrainian refugees, but also other refugees from other countries. I just last year wrote a big article about individuals in Germany rescuing women, feminists, queer people from Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the governments were doing nothing, actually. And they came together as a private group and they tried to get people out of Afghanistan, which shows you a little bit the inhumane way that some Western countries deal with the refugees, even though it's their responsibility after handling Afghanistan, in this case, to the Taliban, and really letting women alone and saying goodbye, you have to deal with your problems. Actually, this is the power step that I'm talking about, that I would like to talk about also as a reporter, which is part of the European identity when it comes to talking about migration and refugees. This is something very important also because we talked about 2015 a lot. In Germany, there is this story that we took 1 million refugees from different countries, especially from Syria, which we have to deconstruct also. If you have a look actually to the statistics, it was not nearly 1 million, and a lot of the people who came in 2015 were, for example, from Albania, and they were sent back immediately to Albania. So it's like a couple of 100,000, which is a lot of people, but actually some politicians in this case and people in different media outlets, they love to have this 1 million just there in German discourses because it sounds better. And my question is, why are these people not complaining now? We took way more Ukrainians and we are spending way more money, as we should, by the way, on Ukrainian refugees. And yes, it's in some cities in Germany a difficult situation with the housing, for example, but the system is not collapsing. But in 2015, it was the end of the world. People were saying, we are going to die because we have 3 Mohammeds in our city coming, and this is state of emergency. So there you can see, from my perspective at least, that pointing out racism is nothing that is constructive, but it's just an observation how different societies and governments actually deal with different groups and refugees. Plus, and this is the last important point that you also mentioned, I think talking about migration and refugees, a lot of people mix up, in Germany at least, mix up migration because of economical reasons, for example, from Eastern European countries, where the German government would love more people to come and to work in Germany. We need more people, more workers actually. They are desperately looking for nurses, for people who build houses, for example, for high-skilled people. And we all know that Germany is not anymore such an attractive country to come to make money. A lot of Polish people, they prefer to stay in Poland right now because it's easier and more convenient for them. And this is why, from a German perspective, it was very logic to say we want also Bulgaria and Romania to join because we need more cheap labor that we can actually exploit for our economic interest. So for me, it's also just important to talk about how migration also fits very well into a capitalistic point of view from certain governments, where they say Sometimes the Ukrainian women are very well educated, and we need anyway people who work in nursing or daycare for children. Sometimes this is like also an argument, and I think from a human rights perspective, if a person is in danger, you let that person in. From a Polish perspective, if Lukashenko is sending you or weaponizing refugees, one way to deal with that is welcoming those people and not closing the border. But this is just my opinion.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you for this presentation. It's really fascinating to see this clash of perspectives. But I would like to precise one thing. Jarosław Kuisz from Kultura Liberalna, University of Warsaw, Poland. So it's fascinating to hear about Poland. By the way, I'm living partially in Germany, so it's just fascinating to see your perspective on the issue. One thing to be perhaps precise is that I believe there is a kind of misunderstanding between, I will talk about it in the next session, but there is a kind of misunderstanding. In fact, Polish government, at least a part of Polish society, acquired refugees not because of the human rights. That was not, I mean, it would be a big misunderstanding. Obviously, there are Poles, and that's, I believe, it's the specificity not only of Poland but of other societies, that we are divided. Some of us are helping because of the human rights agenda, but at least when we are talking about our government in power, they did it for other reasons. And the reason is anti-Russian attitude, mainly, that covers a lot of things. In fact, one should bear in mind that when in the times of the First and Second War in Chechnya, Poland acquired thousands of Chechenians, and regardless their faith and everything else, because they were fighting with Russia, and that was, I mean, alpha and omega of the decision. We have one more thing. It's really significant that in Warsaw we have Johar Dudayev, the Chechen leader, roundabout. And by the way, that was the initiative, at that time that was the initiative of the nationalistic right associated with Kaczynski's brothers at that time. So it's really fascinating to see how complex it is. And it's just to precise this misunderstanding, at least for a part of societies in Eastern Europe, this is all about defending the nation. And when the previous opinion about the weaponization of refugees, with a threat of oversimplifying, I would say at least a part of the society is now sees the situation with the refugees from Belarus and Russia in this way. Okay, so Russians wanted to destroy small and medium-sized nations by gulags in the past. Now they are weaponizing the refugees. I'm oversimplifying, that's obvious, but this is a kind of logic that should be taken into consideration, at least to some extent, that we are talking about the existential threat against Russia.
Can you elaborate on that connection? Because it wasn't really clear.
Okay.
Gulags and weapons.
We are talking about the existential threat for small and medium-sized nations. And in the past, there were other ruthless means to invade the countries, war, terror, gulags. I mean, I'm making a package, of course. Yeah. But today, it's like with the change with the propaganda. In the past, you have the communist propaganda, and it was supposed to impose you one vision of the world. It's not the case anymore. We have new means of fight in the cybersphere, and the main weapon is to blur all the lines, to put as many competing narratives as possible in order to subvert the truth. So we have in Eastern and Central Europe, I believe, by many it is seen, the refugee crisis is seen as the weaponization of refugees by Russia and Belarus. That is a kind of new continuation of the old agenda. I don't know if you understand me correctly, but this is a huge difference with what I mean. It's really like very far from talking about the human rights agenda, regardless the fact that there are many people in Eastern and Central Europe that are thinking in terms of the human rights agenda. But when we are talking about the current refugee crisis on the Belarusian border, one should underline that these are two standpoints within the societies of Eastern and Central Europe. They are far from being coherent. It's like a kaleidoscope of opinions. It was just to be precise. And thank you for your brilliant presentation.
Thank you for your thoughts. If I may react very quickly, it's so interesting to hear this, because that would explain a lot, actually. It would explain why it's so easy from a Polish perspective, for example, to say that we have one group and we don't have in between brackets the other group. At the same time, I know about different families and individuals, and we talked about how individuals are active to support refugees, actually how they open the doors of their homes, for example, and they welcome refugees, mostly Ukrainians, but I also read articles about families on the border to Belarus, where it's apparently illegal to support refugees, for example, from Afghanistan or Turkey or Syria, and people still try to do it. And I just would like to tell a very small, short story. I was in 2015 doing research in Hungary, actually, and I was with a big group of Syrians who fled Putin bombs, actually, and they were in Budapest, and I tried to get to Germany and Sweden, and I look like I look. You know, you see me from far and you know that's Mohamed, actually. And the Hungarian police tried to put me also in one of their cars and push me back to Serbia. In this case, and they were always very surprised when I had my very strong passport, actually. But ultimately, we were safe because there were some Hungarian people who were supporting actually the refugees, who were opening the doors. And ultimately, the last night where they were kidnapping actually refugees, the police, the Hungarian police was kidnapping refugees from the streets to push them back illegally according to European rights, actually. A synagogue opened the door and we could hide in the synagogue, actually, from police, which is like also sometimes giving you a big picture that even if you have this very big discourse, in this case anti-Russian, you said, or I will paraphrase it like this, policy, that you have in the population actually a lot of people who still care about human rights. And the last thing, if we talk about human rights and refugees in the European framework, we have to talk about refugees from Russia, about his opposition and men who don't want to be part of this war, which is a huge problem in the European Union. I know that in Poland, the government is not accepting any refugees or any people who are coming from Russia, men or especially men who don't want to fight. They don't recognize the asylum, or that they anyway apply for asylum. And the German government is also making it very, very hard for these people to apply. And I think it's a question of human rights, actually. If you are with the Ukrainians, you would argue that any man would say that I don't want to be part of this war and fleeing from Russia is a good sign, a good thing, actually. And this is also a question that we have to talk about as European societies, how to deal with this kind of people, actually with this kind of refugees.
Hello, I think you can see me. I'm here. My name is Dimanta. Thank you very much for your presentation. And and I think that this Q&A session turned out to be like some sort of debate. So also that have a question, I just have a couple of remarks. So first of all, just jumping from your latest thought that it's a human rights violation to not accept people from Russia, Russian men to Europe. The common narrative that we have, at least in Lithuania, but I believe in many European Union countries, is that there's a threat of national security. And when we have like these two values on both of our hands, like we need to decide which one to choose. So we choose another one. But actually, I didn't want to make this remark. Actually, I wanted, it's just a short thought, but I just wanted to say that your presentation really, I believe, triggered the audience, because we also have the experience of both having a lot of refugees in our history, and this is also probably typical to many countries of Eastern Bloc, and I believe that we actually are capable of empathy for also refugees from Africa, from, I don't know, East, and I believe that the better narrative to frame and to create a better bridges between our region and other regions is to speak about empathy, and not by, I don't know, comparing that there is a different treatment between people from, for example, historical view from Eastern Bloc and the refugees crisis that we recently have. So this is just a thought, and I believe just a thought for, I don't know, more discussions and further debates. That's it.
Thank you so much. Can I also react to that?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really love this discussion, actually. It gives me a lot of new thoughts and information. And I'm sorry, and not sorry at the same time if someone is triggered, but this is part of my job, actually, to be the person that says everything is bad and we are all going to have a very bad future, actually. But I hope the discussion gives also you new thoughts and perspectives. Just one little thing about the security threat or the alleged security debate, let's say, when talking about Russian refugees. My observation is till now the biggest security threats from a German perspective were German citizens, actually, who were working for the Russian government. We had many cases in German administrations, for example, who were then publicly marked, or they discovered that they were double agents, for example. So these were Gerhard and Rüdiger, actually. These were not Dimitri, these were ethnic Germans. So if we talk about security, we have to have like a broader look on who actually can be a threat, and theoretically everybody can be a threat, actually. That's one thing, and I am actually sometimes very desperate when I talk, for example, here in Turkey to oppositional Russians, and they can actually show you what they did in Russia, that they were part of the opposition. Men who got the call to the military, they chose not to go and they committed a crime. Or, for example, LGBTQ Russians, who, as you may know, face a lot of difficulties in Russia. And when they tell me that they are not able to live in a European country because a lot of European countries, they say, in general, we don't want Russians. I think we need to have this discussion and this debate, actually. Because what are we telling these people? Go back to your country and fight the Ukrainians? I mean, this is why I think And I understand at the same time that from a Baltic perspective, for example, you have another history. I believe you also have a big Russian minority and a big internal discussion within different countries, how to deal with this minority. But in history, it never ended very well to mark a whole minority or to mark a whole ethnic group and say they are because they come from this country or from this background or they have this background, that all of them are evil. And you, at the end, it sounds a little bit more maybe, but you have to look at the individual at the end and decide each time how to deal with that person. And if it's someone who loves cooking and have a set tattooed on his body or her body, then we can have a conversation. But to say that someone is ethnically Russian and then is not entitled to have asylum, I think that's problematic.
Do we have any more questions? So maybe I will ask the last question. I hope to end the discussion on a more positive note or hope. I'm thinking about how we talk in those categories as allowed, not allowed, forbidden, accepted. But I also think how in different years the policies also change, right? They are really dynamic. I'm thinking about Russian and Belarusian opposition, which is based in Vilnius, but now we're getting more and more suspicious towards them. I'm talking about government politics and etc. I also hear about backlash, seeing signs of backlash in both Poland and a bit in Lithuania towards Ukrainian refugees, the ones that we accepted with open hands. So my question is, how do you maintain the solidarity that was at the beginning? How do you expand the solidarity? Do you have any solutions and suggestions for that?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I'm the wrong guy for hope and positive notes. Actually, part of my job is actually to point out, as I said, the negative things and the power abuse and the allegedly wrong political decisions. But at the same time, I believe in transparency and I believe in journalism, actually. I think telling the stories of these people is helping to get for them more sympathy. And this is what I do. And I get sometimes very emotional feedback from the readers, for example, when I speak about the fact that a lot of Syrian refugees, they were denied to have their families. And the families are still in the war zone or still stuck, for example, in Lebanon, which is a very bad situation there because they have an economic crisis. And I describe how this person, because he cannot bring his family, literally lost his mind. Actually, he lost his mind. And telling this story made a lot of people rethink their position about how to deal with different people from different backgrounds, actually. And I get a lot of requests where I cannot help in this case, where people ask me how they can support. And I'm like, I don't know, actually, but I understand each time when I'm, for example, here in Turkey, speaking to a lot of people actually who have a lot of difficulties because of the European regime policy. I understand each time that at least I can tell the stories to a wider audience, in this case mostly in German-speaking countries. But therefore this is why I'm so glad and at the end also happy that we do have this conversation. I would love to be with you there because I think you also have good weather, which is very surprising actually because we think always it's raining there, but this is just also a prejudice that I need to reflect and reconstruct actually. But this is why to me it's so interesting to just listen to your perspective actually, and just don't say it because you have to say it in this framework, but this kind of exchange, maybe it's one or other person to think and rethink about, also me included, about our beliefs and our prejudice and the way we understand and read this world, and maybe to also broaden the horizon and pay more attention to what it means to flee from a war in Syria that is, of course, on the agenda somehow, but not on the agenda really, after 2021 at least, because the people there, they have also a big problem to just get a little bit of attention for their situation. So telling the story and trying to listen also to this kind of refugees, these people, is not giving me hope, but making me feel that it's like a very important part of this course that can be also can become bigger also in European discussions.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your attention.
So when you're in Lithuania, let us know.
I will, that's the first thing I will do.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and see you soon, hopefully.
Yes.
Bye-bye.